Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to today's episode of Locked On Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and thank you for making Locked On Canucks your first listen every day. As always, we are free and available on all platforms. And today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. My name is Nick Bondi. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick Bondi. I'm here as always with my brilliant co-host Lachlan Irvin. You can follow him on Twitter at Lock in the Crease. He's also a Botchford Project alumni. Lachlan, how are you doing today? How was your Thanksgiving?
It was pretty good. I was pretty low key. My dad came over. We had lasagna and pumpkin pie. It was also his birthday, so we did that. We kind of killed two birds with one stone. How about you?
Yeah, you know what? You had a more Italian Thanksgiving than me because I didn't have lasagna or anything like that.
Yeah, it's, you know what, when you have obviously when your dad is vegan, you generally go for like a more lightweight meal, and you go for like the less from the no turkey or anything like that. So it's so vegetarian.
You didn't try the vegan turkey that seems to be popular?
I have not tried that. I used to be vegetarian. I do generally still eat vegetarian turkey every now and then, just because it's actually like good. It's actually good, but like the soy, you shouldn't have too much soy in your diet. But I've heard it's okay.
Nice. Well, you know what? I'm probably never gonna try the vegan turkey, so you're gonna have to be the investigator on that one for me.
Honestly, if you look for the right brands and whatnot, you'd be surprised at how well they make it taste like regular meat. It's actually kind of impressive in a couple cases. One, like in a hockey sort of like story, I actually once when I was still being raised a vegetarian, my mom was managing my hockey team, and she made spaghetti for a team dinner or whatever. And all of my teammates were like, Lachlan, you can't eat this. This is meat sauce. I'm like, no, it's vegetarian ground beef, right? It's vegan. It's vegetarian ground beef. They're like, no, it isn't. It's like, yep, it is. And sure enough, they went to check. Yeah, it was. And they had no idea. They could not tell.
Wow. So you've been a vegetarian for a while. We learn something every day on Locked On Canucks.
Yes, I was a vegetarian until I was 14, 15. Now I eat meat now. Frankly, I'm a better vegetarian now as someone who eats meat, because I found that when you can put vegetables on the side of things that aren't other vegetables, it's much easier to find things you like.
Yeah, and hey, maybe the Canucks were eating vegetables on Thanksgiving as well. I don't know, but since the last time we've recorded this podcast, Lachlan, the Canucks have finalized their roster. We have the opening night roster set for the Vancouver Canucks. A few surprises for me right off the top is Phil Giuseppe getting sent down. I thought he had a really good camp. I thought he locked up a spot because he was a penalty killer. Not so much. Zach McEwen was sent down today. I don't know if that's really a surprise as well, considering I don't think he had the best camp. Lachlan, were there any surprises for you with this opening night roster that's pretty much been set?
Well, you nailed it with Phil DiGiuseppe. He was one of their best players in the preseason and was filling his role nicely every single game, got a lot of opportunities. So the fact that he didn't make this group has me really questioning what the direction is. Him, and I would also throw Will Lockwood into that conversation as well. I
thought he had a good camp too.
He looked really good. He was making good offensive plays. He was throwing big hits when he didn't have the puck. He was sometimes using that to his advantage to bump players off the puck and make a quick play in the offensive zone. He honestly looked like he would make a perfect third, fourth line guy. And so the fact that both of them didn't make the team and instead we got, say, Matthew Highmore, who had a very, I'll say, mediocre camp, and Zach McEwen, who just frankly didn't look like Zach McEwen. I'm kind of surprised that I'm kind of surprised that they did not make it here, and especially when you throw in the fact that Alex Chiasson, who I'm sure we're going to talk about in a second here, because that just came up before we started recording, that they had decided to sign him, and now McEwen's going down to Abbotsford. And then, of course, one other thing we're going to talk about today is Olli Juolevi being traded, which we didn't see coming. Well, we kind of saw it coming, but just maybe not
I think
so
for Olli
quickly.
Juolevi, and we'll get to this in a few minutes, but I think the writing was on the wall when he was pretty much dying on the ice after the bag skate. I think that was kind of the final
For
nail in the coffin.
sure. I just didn't think any sort of deal would come that quickly. I thought it was going to be a lot more of a case of him going to Abbotsford and then them trying to trade him from there, trying to move him from there after he's cleared waivers, or letting him just get claimed on waivers, whatever happened. But I guess one of the players we'll talk about just kind of right now, because it's important to this lineup story, is Yo Lamico. He's one of the forwards. He's the forward they got back in the deal. He's 25, I believe. Finnish kid as well. So you lose a Finn, but you gain one back from Florida. He's brought in, and Jim Benning made it very clear at his press conference yesterday that he feels Lamico is here to help the NHL team now. Like, they don't see him as a guy heading to the farm team. He is very much here to be part of the bottom six. And specifically in the penalty killing spot, he got a few cup opportunities playing the PK under Joel Kuhnville in Florida last season. And it seems like they're pretty hell-bent on having him play in that fourth line and getting him minutes right away, because even today in practice he was playing on that fourth group with Justin Dowling and Vasily Podkolzin. So that also throws an interesting wrinkle into things as far as how this team feels its roster is going to be set come tomorrow against Edmonton.
Yeah, it seems like Lamico was essentially picked up to be that fourth line center who can kill penalties in the mold of Brandon Sutter. Obviously, yesterday, Brandon Sutter, it was announced he's going to be out for a while, right? Because of symptoms related to COVID-19. They call it long
Very
COVID.
sad.
When we wish Brandon Sutter the speediest of recoveries. But it seems like Lamico is going to be slotting in as that fourth line center. That's why they acquired him from Florida, right? Big guy, center who can kill penalties. Seems like a natural fit for what they want for the fourth line center and what Brandon Sutter was initially brought in to do. You mentioned Alex Chiasson, top line Alex Chiasson. The lines tweet out from Ben Kuzma. I got it as he's playing with JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, which is pretty wild, right? Like, obviously, I think he's kind of a placeholder for Brock Besser, who's on injured reserve to start the season. Maybe he's back in a couple of games, but with these, we know he has a problem with the wrist injury from the past. Maybe it's a bit longer. I don't want to be pessimistic to start the Canucks season, but we could be looking at a situation where Chiasson's playing in the top six for a legitimate amount of time, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with Chiasson, obviously you're not going to put him in that bottom six necessarily, because or at least not say on the bottom line, because he's not a PK guy. He's not a defensive stalwart by any stretch. He is very much an offensive contributor. His skill and his specialty is power play and being able to be the setup man for the Stars. Obviously, that was what got him a lot of points in Edmonton, playing alongside.
We saw him do
Connor
that net
McDavid
front
and
in Edmonton as well on the power play, right? Like, that's kind of his bread and butter at this point in his career.
Yeah, exactly. And so right now there is exactly a spot for him right now, because Besser is not here. It fits nicely that he'll play on that first line. It's a bit of a questionable call, considering they have Nils Höglander sitting on the third pairing as like today. Again, these lines might not be set in stone. They could completely change by tomorrow. But right now, Nils Höglander is playing on the third line. You have Tanner Pearson playing up on the second. You have options on guys that you could potentially might be a little bit more successful and might be a better fit for line one specifically, that I'm surprised they didn't go with, and instead they went right to Chiasson. But I mean, at the end of the day, you want to put him in a place to succeed. And if you feel that he's going to succeed most playing alongside Patterson and Miller for the time being, that's the place to put him. Once Besser comes back, you reevaluate and see where you go from there.
Yeah, and on the defensive side, I don't think there were many surprises, right? I think, Jack Rathbone's going to be third pairing left defense. Quinn Hughes going to be pairing with, I guess, Tucker Poolman to start the season because, again, we still don't have any real clarity with Travis Hamonic. He was sent down to the AHL, and it's a situation where, again, we don't want to speculate because we're not sure what exactly is going on. I don't want to speculate and get in trouble that way, to be honest. But for the defense, I think no real surprises there, except maybe how the defensemen are paired. OEL and Myers. Like we talked about it on the last episode. It's good for the memes, but if you want to win games, I'm not too sure.
I think I will say that I've made the joke with OEL and Tyler Myers that I think you mitigate some defensive issues by putting that where you mitigate defensive issues by not spreading those two up with splitting them up with other partners and putting them together and just kind of hoping for the best there. Honestly, that might be the best fit right now. Like I don't think you want to necessarily for sure put Myers with Hughes or even though Poolman OEL kind of makes sense as a pair. I am surprised that Kyle Burrows has made it this far. He was not a guy at all I had pegged making it at the start of training camp. And that's not necessarily, and he did well. He did very well. I just kind of thought, well, he'll go to Abbotsford eventually, but nope, he's still here. And it makes sense in this because of the fact that, Luke Shen had a very, very poor preseason. And even though I would argue maybe Brad Hunt is probably the better option as a sixth forward, we know Travis Green, or sixth defenseman, sorry. We know Travis Green doesn't like to put defensemen on their offside. So it was going to be hard for Brad Hunt to crack that lineup without an injury or somebody missing. So Burrows kind of makes the most sense in that spot without Hamonic. I think right now this is probably the best spot you're going to get. I do have some questions about the idea of having Rathbone and Burrows playing together just as two guys who are a little less experienced at the NHL level playing together on a unit and kind of hoping they can fend for themselves. Again, you kind of hope that you have a veteran presence, a stay-at-home defenseman who can ease along Rathbone right now. There isn't really that option at the current time. Maybe that'll get solved later in the season. Who knows? But for now, this is probably the best group of pairings you're going to get.
Now, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about my boy, Nick Patan, making the opening night roster. It's like that. It's like a gift from Brooklyn Nine-Nine of Captain Holt. Vindication. That's what I feel right now. That's what I feel right now. All my takes from the 2015 World Juniors are slowly becoming true. Now, look, I'll put a bit of damper on in the sense that Ben Kuzma, in his tweet about the lines, pretty much has Patan as a 13th forward. That's not what I like to see. But you know what I'm thinking for Nick Patan, Lachlan? Do you remember?
Oh, no.
Do you remember?
I'm scared. That's dangerous. You're thinking that's dangerous.
Yeah, it's usually that gets me in a lot of trouble. But Nick Patan, right? Do you remember Sam Gagner when he was with Columbus, 2016-17, when he had that really good year? And essentially what the Columbus Blue Jackets did was they kept him on the fourth line 5-on-5, but they gave him power play time, right? I think we can see a similar situation. If Travis Green, if you're listening to this, just hear me out for a second. Nick Patan, fourth line minutes. He has deficiencies in his game that maybe he shouldn't be playing top 6 minutes at 5-on-5. I get that. Okay. But maybe shelter him a bit 5-on-5, put him on that fourth line, shelter him a bit, give him power play time. He has the on puck skills that he can, I think, contribute on the power play. That's the role I see for Nick Patan on this team.
Yeah, I think it's possible for him. But of course, I think again, this is where the Chiasson thing comes in, right? Chiasson is essentially playing in the spot where
goddamn Chiasson. He's gonna ruin my plans for Patan.
Yeah, but he's basically playing in the spot where Patan would do best. I obviously don't think you're gonna say throw Patan in on line 2 at the expense of say a Connor Garland or a Nils Höglander. So he's in a tough spot. It was looking like maybe he could play in the third line if say Chiasson hadn't been signed and they hadn't just got and they hadn't just got Lamico into the mix as well. But yeah, right now he's the odd man out. And like I've said before on the show, the way that the Canucks approach things when it comes to like the 13th forwards or like the depth guys is what specialty can you bring? And what role and how well can you fit a role even if it's not the one that you're best at? Are you able to be as usable in as many situations as possible? So for Nick Petan, that might mean, hey, proving he can play a lot of penalty kill and proving he can be a good defensive guy as well. Just until, and because again, if you do well at those things and you're able to make yourself a jack of all trades in those aspects, they'll make room for you down the line if you can prove that that works.
Yeah, and I think for a guy like Batan, he can be, I think, like a power play sort of specialist on this roster, right? If given the opportunity. Again, he has great on puck skills, I think. So if you get on an opportunity to show what he can do on the power play, I think he can flourish. I really do. And Lachlan. So we've talked about most of this roster. Two players that are on this roster right now are Brock Besser and Tyler Mott. We expect them to be back in the lineup when they're both healthy. My last question to you about the Canucks roster, and then we can move on to Olli Juolevi and our hot takes for this coming NHL season as a whole. Where do you see Brock Besser and Tyler Mott fitting when they do come back from their injuries?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Besser's going to go to line one. I mean, that seems like as close to a given as you can possibly get. And I know you agree with me on that. Yeah, and with JT Miller on that and Patterson on the Lotto line, reuniting that as soon
reunite
as possible
the Lotto
makes the
line.
most
That's
sense right
a
now.
guarantee.
If it right now it's very much a case of get back to normal, and then if you want to start tinkering with guys once he's healthy and when they're healthy and back, then you get into that. With Mott, it's a little bit more interesting in terms of like who that might come at the cost of, because Mott is clearly going to go on line 4. He's clearly going to play on that left side. Right now, I mean, the guy you're probably looking at who might jump out of the lineup is probably either Matthew Highmore or Juolevi. One of those two guys is probably
If
in
you
there.
said Nick Petan, I was about to jump through the screen and
Well, see,
like
the
strangle you or
problem
something
there
like
is
that.
that Petan would have to go to waivers in that case, because he's the 13th, so he'd have to head to Abbotsford. So this is kind of where this is where it gets hairy, because right now Petan's not a penalty killer. Mott 100% is. And they're not going to want to take Highmore or Lamico out of the rotation because they're also those kind of guys. Maybe Justin Dowling goes instead. I would find that unlikely because he did very well in the preseason on the fourth line as a center. I would find that a little bit harder to expect. Petan is probably the guy heading to Abbotsford in that case, and then the odd man out in terms of like the healthy scratch is probably one of Highmore or Lamico, whoever's not playing at the level they feel they're most comfortable at.
I don't agree with the Petan take at all, but you make some good points about Tyler Mott. Like they do need him back, I think, especially for the penalty kill. You remember in the bubble he was so good on the penalty kill and scoring shorthanded goals. Like he is a legitimate threat, I think, shorthanded. So it'll be interesting to see where those two fit when they get back in. Again, fully healthy, the Canucks have a ton of options, especially on the forward lines to mix and match. One player that won't be here, is no longer here, is traded to Florida, is Olli Juolevi. We're going to get right into the Olli Juolevi trade with the Florida Panthers. But before I do that, I want to talk to you about BetOnline.ag. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Don't forget to use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From football, basketball, boxing, hockey, right to your favorite casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the upcoming 2021 season. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for all the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part is there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
Okay, we're going to get into the Olli Juolevi trade in just a second, but I want to remind everyone about Locked On's NHL season preview show that's live, hosted by Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark tonight at 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Locked On NHL YouTube page. Andrew, Mary tee up the new NHL season with a look at the key storylines around the league, featuring drop-ins from our roster of local NHL hosts, fantasy insights from Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Scott Cullen, and award Stanley Cup playoff prediction. Okay, so we're going to get into our own playoff predictions for the NHL at the end of the show. But of course, Olli Juolevi, the saga is finally over, Lachlan. He's been traded to the Florida Panthers for Juho Lammikko, who we mentioned about earlier, is playing fourth line center for the Vancouver Canucks. That's kind of why they acquired him with the whole Brand Sutter situation. And Noah Juleson. If this guy ever gets called up, Noah Juleson, the joke hitting the Juleson is going to get used so much. I'm already kind of cringing at it. Everyone's going to be using that joke, but
the
Juolevi,
merchandise that's going to come out of that on Teespring or something.
Oh yeah, no, all the Jewel jokes are going to be just over the top if he ever gets called up. Which the Canucks are going to be in a pretty bad situation if Noah Juleson ever gets called up and has to play NHL minutes. Very much minor league defensive depth, Noah Juleson. In terms of Olli Juolevi, again, the saga is kind of over. 2016 fifth overall pick. We don't have to get into the backstory that much because I think, if you're listening to this podcast, kind of the backstory of Olli Juolevi. I just want to say, look, he was maybe a bit of a reach at the time in 2016. I know a lot of people were clamoring for Matthew Tkachuk. I know I was. It goes to I think the whole Olli Juolevi saga goes to show why, one, you should be drafting, the best player available instead of positional depth, right?
Yes,
100%. I think that's a good strategy to go by because obviously at the time you drafted Jake Virtanen, you got Brock Besser. I can see the thinking behind, okay, we don't need another forward. We need a top defensive prospect. You go with Juolevi. And the second thing is, he got injured in his key development years, and that really hampered him, right? Like sometimes this just happens to top prospects and top level athletes in general. Their bodies just fail them, and it's unfortunate, and it's very hard to predict. If it was, there'd be a lot less, quote unquote busts in drafts in general throughout every sport that has a draft pretty much. And you know what? Like there were signs that Olli Juolevi was regressing a bit the season after he was drafted, right? You go look up his stats from the London Knights the season after. He was pretty much plateauing, which is you never like to see from a high level pick like that. Maybe, you know what? Maybe if Olli Juolevi, if he doesn't have those injuries to his knee in his key development years, maybe he becomes a steady top four defenseman for this team. I don't think he would ever be, the stud, top pairing defenseman the Canucks hoped when they drafted him. But, maybe without those injuries, he becomes a serviceable player for the Vancouver Canucks instead of, being traded 6 years later for minor league fourth line depth.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's I was thinking about it yesterday when I was writing my latest article, like covering some preseason notes and whatnot. I was thinking about just how that draft, the 2016 draft in particular, is such a important moment, I think, in the Jim Benning era in terms of just how everything went wrong, be it completely out of their hands or by their own doing. Like
it's a big sliding doors moment, to borrow a phrase from Bill Simmons. It's a big sliding door moment. Who knows what happens if they take Matthew Tkachuk from at 5? Who knows? There was all these rumors that Elliot Freeman reported, and he doesn't report something unless it's 100%.
I think in this time that they would have gotten. You're talking about PK Subban, I think.
Yeah,
had Pierre-Luc Dubois been available on the board at number 5, they wanted to trade up. But then the Jackets obviously swooped and took him. And in the Jackets thing, imagine if seriously, and talk about out of their hands, imagine if Columbus and Winnipeg don't jump out in front of them in the draft lottery. Imagine if the lottery is done in the way it is now, where they've really increased the odds for the bottom 5 teams, or like the bottom however many. Whereas Columbus and Winnipeg leapfrogged a bunch of people to get in front, dropped the Canucks to 5th, and instead of ending up with the potential of, say, of getting to pick between one of Austin Matthews, Patrick Laine, and Jesse Puljujarvi, or Pierre-Luc Dubois, if you want to go in that direction too, that's also an option. You get none of them. And then, of course, you step up to make your pick, and instead of taking Matthew Tkachuk, easily the clear better player between him and Olli Juolevi, even at the time, you take Juolevi instead, because again, like you said, they felt they needed more defensemen. But that's not the way you should ever look at a draft, because most of the time, unless they're the Austin Matthews or Patrick Laine, they're not going to step into your roster immediately anyway. So there's no point in drafting from an organizational standpoint. This isn't football where guys are generally jumping immediately right into NFL action the second they get drafted.
You're drafting 18-year-olds. There's a lot of variance with 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
I think we all remember when we were 18 what we were like.
Oh God, I was terrible. Yeah, and it's a case of, it's the Canucks they shot themselves in the foot there. They also got undone by the dynamics of the draft at that time, particularly thanks to the team in front of them, the Oilers, winning 4 drafts in an insanely short window. They got screwed over by that, but at the same time, they also didn't do themselves a lot of favors. And also, bad luck. Like, there's Juolevi got hurt. I believe he hurt his I believe he hurt his back just before he was going to come over to North America and play his first season with Utica. And that completely derailed things. He's had multiple knee surgeries. There was the whole rumor that he was addicted to video games, which turned out to be not true. Well, it turned out to be about somebody.
Honestly,
it turned out to be someone else.
You know what? It would have been funny if he was the other guy addicted to video games. At least it would have been a memorable prospect, or at least a funny footnote. And now he's just a prospect who just didn't work out at all for the Canucks. Yeah. Again, not 100% his fault. He did get injured a bunch, and that that happens all the time across sports with drafts, right? It happens.
It was a completely it just went completely sideways so fast. I mean, even now, like, you look at, and that 2016 draft as a whole, like, I think only one player is still here from that group or something like that, or it's something very shocking, just considering again where the Canucks were at in their rebuild stage at that point. That so many of them completely missed. They completely airballed on. But yeah, Juolevi is it's kind of a tragic story at the end of the day, because this is a kid who had potential to maybe not be a 5th overall worthy player, but at least
I don't think he ever would have been the top pairing.
NHL. No, he could have been but he could have been a regular NHLer playing decent minutes, like, and being a key piece of a key depth piece of a potential playoff contender or champion kind of thing. And the way things went, the way his development stalled out, whether that's due to injuries, the Canucks not managing it properly, etc., wherever you want to chalk it up to, it did not work. And it's a failure for the organization in a sense, but also just, again, some just rotten luck. You hope he gets the opportunity. You hope he gets an opportunity and finds some success in Florida. Like, you want him to succeed. We don't dump on players because we don't like them. We want to see them succeed. We want them to do very well. We want them to be the players that they can be. And I hope he gets that opportunity with the Panthers.
Yeah, and you made a good point there. The story is not written, I don't think, for Olli Juolevi just yet, right? Maybe it does turn around in Florida. Stranger things have happened in the National Hockey League. I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't put money on it. But hey, it could happen, right? Like, it could happen.
It's like I said earlier about Juolevi, I think a few weeks ago, and kind of I talked about it with prior player in Jake Virtanen, who's obviously not in the NHL for really much different, much more serious reasons. But in Juolevi's case, if he does, let's say he magically does turn into a great regular NHLer in Florida, that should just cement the fact that Vancouver was not the place he was going to make that happen. That was not the place that it was going to work for him. And because again, not every organization is a perfect one-for-one fit for every single prospect and athlete they get. So if it works out for him, that's great. And you shouldn't, and Canucks fans shouldn't necessarily take that as a slight against the organization that it worked out for him elsewhere. It should be more just the fact that, hey, clearly this was not the right place for him, and you should just be happy that he's finding any form of success in a different market.
Yeah, and again, we mentioned earlier, he did not do himself any favors with all those images of him looking dead on the ice after a bag stick, right? Like that was not. I think the decision was made pretty much then to this is going to be Juolevi's last camp with us,
hurrah.
And yeah, and we're gonna have to find some sort of, and credit to the Canucks for, I guess, finding a trade partner. I thought he would just be on waivers, he would be in Abbotsford, and we kind of just forget about him.
Yeah, it says a lot that this season his biggest contribution to the Canucks is going to be through the t-shirts we made. Me and my podcast partner made for our other show. We made there were these always tired shirts, basically based on a great drawing by a Twitter user at Grip It and Rip It. She made some really cool drawing images of him lying on the ice, and we did them for charity, and people have been buying them, and I think they've raised over 120 for Canucks for Kids, so Canucks fans are doing their part there. And Olli Juolevi kind of did his part on that too. So, at the end of the day, he's going to have donated some money to charity this season, and that's always good.
That could be his legacy with the Vancouver Canucks. Being a meme on a shirt that donates money to Canucks for Kids. I think
Yeah.
There's been worse legacies for players from the Vancouver Canucks. You just mentioned one a few moments ago. So the team Olli Juolevi got traded to, the Florida Panthers, a team we're probably going to mention in our NHL season predictions. But before that, a quick word from our sponsor, Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now possible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. With Rock Auto, you can save time, money. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and they have everything you could ever need for your car: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Okay, Lachlan, NHL season predictions, previews. Tomorrow we're going to get into our more specific Canucks season predictions and previews, but we figured we take the time to share our thoughts on the upcoming NHL season with all our listeners here at Locked On Canucks. Your first listen of the day. Let's start with something easy: division winners. I guess I'll go first. I went chalk with a lot of mine. And if you don't know, chalk is just a gambling term, going with the heavy favorites. Okay. I went, Pacific for Vegas. I think, they're still a juggernaut in the Pacific, and they should win the Pacific in the regular season. Colorado for the Central. Again, they're the Stanley Cup favorites, and they have to be treated as such. Still a very, very good team. Yeah, they lost Grubauer, but they still have a great defense. And Kemper, I think he's going to have a good season behind that defense. They don't give up much. And at least as long as you have a decent goalie like Kemper, that should be good for Vegas. Out east, I think in the Atlantic, I'm going a bit off the board. I'm going Florida. I'm going the Florida Panthers. I really like their team. I like their forward depth. I like their defense. The goaltending is a bit of a question mark with the Bobrovsky. I think, people are, too quick to jump on Spencer Knight. I saw he was like one of the Calder favorites. Look, Bobrovsky's still making $10 million a year. So they're still going to, feed him starts as much as possible, right? They don't want to have a $10 million backup. That's the only thing. But, Florida should probably be a very good regular season team. Emphasis on regular season, because with Joe Thornton on that team, aka Chokin' Joe, as I like to call him, I don't know if they're long. I don't know if they're long for the playoffs. That's my issue with Florida. Be a good regular season team, but be fully prepared with Joe Thornton on that team to fail in the playoffs in spectacular fashion. Just look at last season with the Leafs. And I also think the Leafs are going to be one of the two wild card teams in the Eastern Conference. I don't think they'll finish top 3 in the Atlantic this season. In the Metropolitan Division, I'm going off the board as well. I'm going Washington. Look, people are doing the same thing with Pittsburgh, right? Like, people are too quick to write off Washington and Pittsburgh. People want to be the people who are first to call the demise of Pittsburgh and Washington. Until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. They have to show me that they're not a playoff contender anymore for me to just say they're going to fall off completely off a cliff this season, right? I think so. A team like Washington, I can still see them winning the Metropolitan Division. It's wide open, that one. Like, Carolina took a step. I like the Islanders, but I don't think they'll be that good in the regular season. Lachlan, who are your winners for these divisions?
Okay, so I went I in the West, I went very much in the same direction. You know, Vegas is the clear favorite in the Pacific. There's no doubt about it. If they let's not kid ourselves. If they didn't win the division, it would be a colossal failure on their part. Like, they should have no problem winning it. If they did, they should take a good long look at themselves.
Edmonton will probably be their toughest challenge in the division for the top spot, I would say.
Yeah, and even then, that's not a necessary, considering the depth that Vegas has compared to the Oilers. That shouldn't be a problem for them if they're really serious about it. Unless, of course, Connor McDavid goes and scores like 200 points, which he totally probably could. It would not, if he did. Let me put it this way: if Connor McDavid magically scored 200 points this year, I would not bat an eye at that.
Yeah.
Like, I
just, you know what? I was looking at the player.
Right.
I was looking at the odds for all these major awards on our sponsor BetOnline.ag just before we started on the show, and McDavid's pretty much like a 1-to-1 favorite to win the Art Ross, a scoring title, which is pretty wild, right? Like, you never see that for like any of these major awards, right? It's usually, you never see a favor that early. But that's how good McDavid has been.
Serious competition, but no, not this year at all. I went with Colorado in the Central. I think they're obviously Colorado. I will say that personally, I think their goaltending is a bit of a concern for me.
You don't like Kemper?
I like Kemper, actually. I really like Kemper. The problem is he's very injury prone, and so is their backup, Pavel Francouz, who I believe is injured right now. That's my biggest concern for them, and this is something that goes back to their time in the bubble. They lost in the second round of the playoffs in the bubble because first Grubauer got hurt, then Francouz got hurt, then they were down to Michael Hutchinson. And it was and that completely undid them because they just suddenly they went from having perfectly good NHL goaltending to having none. And I look at Colorado as a team that should have put more stock into finding a goaltender that's a little less injury prone and a little bit more of a safe of a Iron Man bet there. And Darcy Kemper isn't that. He often ends up missing a decent chunk of time with an injury at some point. So I'm a little concerned for them in that regard in the long run, but I think they'll be okay as far as the regular season is concerned. In the Atlantic, I also went with Florida. I think Florida's going to be I think Florida's going to be very good this year. I think that I really want to see them succeed. Like, I've wanted to see the Panthers succeed for a long time. Obviously goes back to Luongo being there for such a long period of time. I really wanted to see them get him a damn cup. They never could. But you hope that they can with this group. I think Spencer Knight is going to be quite good this year. I think that I think down the line it's going to be a case where Bobrovsky will get every opportunity they can to make him worth that $10 million contract. But I think eventually they're going to get to a point where it's like, well, we kind of want to win games here, so we're going to put Spencer Knight in instead, and I think he'll do quite well. Tampa Bay second, like close behind them. I think that's pretty obvious for them. I don't think you can count them out. As far as the Metro is concerned, I went with Carolina, partially because I think that they're a team that has in the past shown that they can get behind. They can win a lot of games, even with so-so goaltending. And, Alex Nedeljkovic was not bad. Alex Nedeljkovic was a very good goalie for them last season. But he is now gone because they didn't want to pay him $3 million for whatever reason. I guess I don't buy that logic. I also don't buy the Tony DeAngelo logic for very obvious reasons. But they did add, they are a team that's very, very sound, structured, like a very good, well-rounded group. I think they'll win the division. I went with the Islanders in second. I think that they're probably good enough to win the division. But I just personally, I don't. I can't let root for the Islanders' success. They're such a boring team to watch. I don't want them winning games, so I needed to put them in second. And then I had Washington in third there. I actually do have Pittsburgh out of the playoffs simply because they have injuries. They're dealing with injuries right now. After seeing Tristan Jarry in the playoffs last year, I have a lot of concerns in goal for them. Philly is another team that I think could jump up here or there, depending on how things go. Specifically with their goaltending. If Carter Hart looks like he did in his rookie year, they'll make the playoffs. If he doesn't, they're in a lot of trouble. And then there's the Rangers in there as well. I think the Rangers are in that conversation, just as a matter of how much their younger guys step up, how much they look a little bit more well put together this year than they did last. And we'll see what they can do. Hopefully their 6 assistant captains make something happen there.
Yeah, 6 assistant captains. When I saw that, like, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, just choose a captain already. Good Lord.
Just choose 1 C and 4 A's and get it over with. As far as like a potential like wild card team is concerned, I have Boston in the wild card spot right now. As the last wild card spot, simply because of the fact that I think I don't know if you've ever seen much of like Bruins Twitter or Bruins social media, but they have been riding on Tuukka Rask for the last however many years.
Which
just
is
an
ridiculous.
insane amount of years.
He's one of the best goalies in the league.
He's probably the best goalie in franchise history, like that they've ever, like their best goalie ever. And now he's gone. Now they don't have him. He's a UFA. They're going in with Jeremy Swayman and I believe Linus Ullmark, two pretty good goalies, like young guys. But I think the Bruins, and I think Bruins fans in particular, are about to find out how much Tuukka Rask was masking some of their problems and masking their abilities. I think they're going to be in a lot tougher a situation this year, and they're going to be wishing they still had Tuukka Rask back. And that's not based on, and that's not me saying that I think their goalies are bad or anything. I just think they're not Tuukka Rask levels of being able to steal games on a regular basis. So I think they're going to find out that it's a lot tougher to play with a young developing goaltender than it is with a bona fide guy like Tuukka Rask.
Yeah. So Lachlan, your dark horse and your hot take. Let's go with that. Dark horse pick and hot take. That could be obviously from around the league. You go first this time.
Originally, I guess my dark horse would have been Florida winning the division, but I'm not going to go there this time. My dark horse, I guess this is technically Canuck related, and it's the one I mentioned in the hot take that I mentioned in the video in our Locked On Hot Takes videos. Was I think Vancouver's going to finish second. I think they're going to finish second in the division. I think they're going to get home ice against Edmonton. For a couple of reasons. One, the Canucks have much better goaltending in Thatcher Demko and Jarro Halak than the Oilers do in 41-year-old Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen. I think the Oilers. Mike Smith is very good when he's on his game. The problem is he's getting old and he's not able to play as many games as he used to. So I think you're going to see, the downturn there. Thatcher Demko is a goalie on the rise, who I think is doing very well. I think the Canucks are much more well-rounded on offense. And as far as just, yes, they don't have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, who are human cheat codes, but they have a very good group when they're healthy. They have a very well-rounded scoring group. And that the Oilers, I don't think, are yet able to match. I think they're getting better at it. I think they're getting better, but they're still not there yet. And I would argue the defense is a bit of a wash. Like, I don't look at the Oilers as a well-rounded defensive group, especially considering their big acquisition was Duncan Keith. I don't think they're going anywhere defensive-wise. So I think the Canucks are just in a situation where, look, when they're playing Edmonton, as long as they stay disciplined and out of the penalty box, I think they're going to win a lot more of those games than people anticipate. And I think it's going to come down to very much that tiebreaker of who won the most games against each other when it gets to playoff seeding. And I think Vancouver's going to take it in that regard.
All right. So my dark horse is the Minnesota Wild. Look, after what happened in the offseason when they bought out Parise and Suter, right? It is Kaprizov's team. They gave him the big deal. That is his team. I think he's going to have a monster year, and I like the Minnesota Wild depth. I like their goalies as well. Cam Talbot did really well last year. He's proven that behind, a somewhat defensive team, he is a serviceable starter, and he could be a good starter. They got a good tandem there with Cam Talbot and Capo Kapanen. And I think, at minimum, they're going to be a second round playoff team and maybe just even beat Colorado in the second round and get on, to the conference finals this season. I think they were kind of screwed by the division last year, having to face Vegas in the first round. I thought they were a really, really good team. They deserved a better fate last year. I think that's going to happen this year. My hot take is, I mentioned this just a couple minutes ago. It's going to be Leafs aren't going to be top 3 in the division. They're going to be one of the wild card teams. The Leafs this year could go 82-0. And the haters like myself would be like, okay, you got to win the playoff round though.
At least you're willing to admit you're part of the hater.
My online brand is like #1 Toronto Maple Leafs hater. I have that is my personal brand, it seems, online, especially on Twitter. So yeah, Leafs aren't going to be one of the top 3 teams in the division. It's going to be really hard again for them to get motivated for the regular season because it is all about the playoffs this year for Toronto. Can they finally get over the monumental hump of winning a playoff round? The TSN mentioned it. It's the last dance, except the last dance for the Leafs is actually having some sort of remnants of
trying
success
to still have
in the playoffs.
First one. It's still trying to get the first dance.
It's just trying to get over the first hurdle of winning a single championship, not winning, the 6 and 8 years or whatever. So, you know what? Yeah. I think the Leafs, again, they're going to be very hard to be motivated for the regular season because it doesn't matter what they do in the regular season. It's all about the playoffs. And I think they're going to suffer a bit because of that. And even today, Mitch Marner had a head injury, had to leave practice today. The wheels are already starting to fall off, Lachlan.
Jeez.
The wheels are already starting. I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
As one late hot take to throw in, just because we're very much running low on time here. Does me having Calgary out of the playoffs, does that count? Is that a hot take?
I don't think it's a hot take.
No? Okay. Because I was kind of like, I threw Seattle in ahead of them. Because I think Seattle's going to be better out of the gate here than they are.
The next GM of the Calgary Flames is going to be, you ever watch Office Space? It's going to be like those 2 guys who just interview people. And the next GM is going to ask Sean Monahan, what exactly do you do here? Like, what exactly does Sean Monahan do that's anything impressive? He's the most just bland player out there.
Yeah, I'm sure the Twitter account isn't doing him any favors. I think Calgary. Well, and it's funny because our next GM is probably just Daryl Sutter again because that seems to be the way things go with Calgary. I think Calgary's in a lot of trouble until they decide what they are. Right now, they're very much in a spot where they're trying to decide are we Tkachuk's team or are we Gaudreau's team? And I think the smart thing for them to do would be to decide they're Tkachuk's team now and start making the decisions accordingly. But they seem very hell-bent on being no, this is still the Gaudreau show and Monahan's team. It's no, it really isn't. You really shouldn't be building around him rather than the much better player in Matthew Tkachuk. Please, if you really want to win, please make that decision sooner rather than later. But I mean, obviously, as a team that benefits from Calgary not knowing what they are, I hope they keep taking their sweet time with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So Lachlan, we'll end on this. Again, we are running. This has been dragging on quite a while.
Long show.
It's a long show, but I hope everyone's still listening and enjoying the content. Your Stanley Cup winner, Lachlan.
Stanley Cup winner. Let's go. You know what? I think Colorado is going to probably get it done this year. I think that I believe that
we've been saying that the past 2 years.
We have. I mean, but we've also been saying it's no longer Tampa's time, and then they figure it out too, right? So I think Colorado's going to fly a little bit more under the radar this season than they did in years past, and I think they might get that done in that regard. I also could very well see, you know what? You want to throw a weird one in there? Florida. Let's go Florida. I think Florida could get something done. I think it's meant. I think it'd be very okay. But listen, how funny would it be if after all the times of trying for Joe Thornton with San Jose, the one time with Toronto, the place he finally gets it done is in Florida? That would be kind of incredible. That'd be like the best way.
Joe is the problem. That's what's happening here.
It's
Joe
the hard
is
luck
the problem.
franchise with the hard luck player. It's not. I mean, he's old. He's just kind of along for the ride at this point.
I was all aboard the Florida bandwagon until I found out they signed Joe Thornton. And I'm like, you know what? They're going to be a good regular season team, and then they're going to fail spectacularly in the playoffs. That's his specialty. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You want to hear my pick for the Cup?
Yes.
You're not going to like this one. Not going to like this one. The New York Islanders. New York Islanders are going to win the Stanley Cup over the Colorado Avalanche.
See, it wouldn't surprise me if that happened at all. Like that wouldn't
you
be.
Can
that
say
would not. I would not bat
season,
an eye at
but
that.
They play a style that's perfect for the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's been proven the last 2 years.
Absolutely, and I hate that teams haven't figured out how to beat that yet, because God, it's like, okay, as a person who watches hockey on a regular basis, I can obviously get behind, like, obviously I know what's going on and I know what they're doing and I know what kind of talent that takes. But for casual hockey fans who the NHL is trying to entice this year with new broadcast deals and everything else that they're doing, new marketing, a bunch of new stuff going on for them. If you put a casual hockey fan in front, or like a first timer in front of a New York Islanders game, all they're going to take out of it is, this is the most boring thing I've ever seen. Like there's no offense.
They might like the hitting and the physicality.
They might, but that's not. But you can get that in other sports. What you can't get in other
I'm not
sports
concerned
is the
about the
quick
long-term
speed.
ramifications of the NHL, and I just want to be right on my Stanley Cup prediction. So
You
that's
just want to be right. I want the sport to
get
get more notoriety, and the New York Islanders are not going to do that in any way. They're
going
to drive people away.
Lachlan, here's what's going to happen, okay? Lou Lamoriello is going to hoist the Stanley Cup over his head, and he's going to show why the Leafs made the wrong choice picking Kyle Dubas over Lou Lamoriello. That's what's going to happen.
Because
after the Leafs bow out of the first round once again, after facing either, let's say Florida
that needed
or
redemption, it's old hockey men. They needed their redemption sure.
He's going to show why the Leafs were wrong in dumping him over Kyle Dubas.
I certainly hope not. God, that would be just a nightmare.
And John Tavares is going to be crying. And John Tavares is going to be crying into his pajamas, his Leafs pajamas, that he left the Islanders. That's what's going to happen.
God, that'd be such a nightmare. You know how many old hockey people on Twitter we'd never hear the end of it from if Lou Lamoriello won? Like, it's not even about if the Leafs did win. It's about just if out of every team to win, it's Lou Lamoriello's New York Islanders playing the old neutral zone trap. God, the amount of damage that would do to the sport. Like, his Devils set the league back years with the neutral zone trap and completely killed any casual
do you think Lou Lamoriello would give Mitch Marner that ridiculous deal that he got? That he's so
It's not
overpaid.
about the Leafs. Who cares about them? I'm just talking about the fact that Lou Lamoriello, even though he doesn't care about it, he will never care. He destroyed the league's like casual interest.
You're projecting all of the NHL's inferiority complex onto Lou Lamoriello, and that's not fair. Don't do Lou like that.
His teams turned everyone into neutral zone trap teams and made every game as boring as humanly possible. Like, I'm sure it gets results, but at what cost? You know how much better this sport would be
The Islanders are not a neutral zone trap team.
Oh my God!
They
score one goal and they sit back and just play defensive hockey the rest of the night. They like 1-0 games. That's the worst kind of hockey to watch if you're a casual.
Sometimes, hey, that's playoff hockey. Sometimes, hey, we can complain all you want about how the refs are calling, different games in the playoffs, and I agree, they do, and it should stop.
I will.
But
I
will complain too. But until that changes, you got to learn how to play the game. And the Islanders do that.
I agree with that. I do agree with that. But I'm never going to stop harping on the Islanders for playing boring ass hockey because they deserve it.
They're going to play boring ass hockey and they're going to win the cup this year, Lachlan. I'm telling you right now. Anyways, that is today's episode of Locked On Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, we're available free on all platforms, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be posting full episodes on our YouTube page every single day. Thank you for making this episode your first listen today, and make sure your second episode of the day is Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Host Scott Cullen leans on his decades of fantasy hockey insight and experience every day to help you be the expert of your fantasy team. I listened to it. I binged it yesterday before my fantasy hockey draft. I can say it definitely helped me. My team's going to rule this year. Once again, this is Locked On Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. For Lachlan Irvin, my name is Nick Bondi. Thank you for listening.